So I'm making this video of my wagon because it used to be an automatic and I swapped it over to manual, and this is everything I had to do to get my wagon to swap it over to manual. Which the first thing I didn't know about when I did it first is moving this motor mount that's on the passenger side of the engine bay. You have to drill out these plug welds and move it. I'm not exactly sure where to yet because I never did that on the first time. But I'm going to get to that this second time with the new engine and tranny I'm putting in it, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But your clutch cables bolt right here into the firewall, right above the crossmember, and they're not that hard to put in. You just got to make sure they're adjusted right so that you can shift through all the gears. The clutch cable comes in to the firewall right by the brake booster here, and it wraps around the back side of the engine, plugs into your tranny over here. As far as on the inside, there's not a whole lot. Swapping over the manual pedal pack, these wagons came from the factory with bolts for manual pedals or the automatic pedals, so that was nice. It just bolted right up, and then I had to hook up my clutch cable. These transmission cables go under this little plastic deal that spits heat out in the rear seats, and then they run through this little bracket that holds the cables in their spot. And then I believe, if I'm remembering right, I had to drill the holes for the shifter to mount. It was 6 years ago when I did the swap the first time, and I drove my car for a little while, but I got tired of that not having reverse because that transmission had blown reverse. So then I parked it, pulled everything back out, and it's just been sitting here waiting for me to work on it some more. I did change out my cluster because the automatics has, the park drive and all the gear selectors there, and I changed that out just so it's a complete manual swap. It ran fine with my half-assed manual swap on the last time, except for underneath the passenger seat there is an ignition interlock that I didn't know about that it won't let the key turn off because when I had the automatic harness in it, I had wires that weren't connected to my transmission, and so that the computer thought that the transmission wasn't in park, and it wouldn't let me turn my key off. So every time I turned my car off, I had to turn it off, get out, disconnect the battery, turn the key all the way off, pull the key out, and then connect the battery again. And that got annoying after a while, and I didn't even know about the ignition interlock because there was nothing on Google about it until I started doing my manual wiring harness swap, and I had my passenger seat out right here, and I saw the ignition interlock underneath the passenger seat, the little black box, and it should say ignition interlock right on it. And I'm hoping that after I get done doing this swap that it's going to work the way it should. The key should be able to come all the way off and everything. And I'm in the middle, or I guess you could say the tail end of doing my manual swap. The manual harness and the automatic harness are different. There was a lot of plugs for the automatic transmission sensors left in the engine bay after I did the swap the first time. I didn't swap over my automatic harness. So I'm in the process of doing that right now. The nice thing is that a lot of the plugs are different shapes, so it's hard to mix up the plugs. Every plug has its own little spot, and that made it a little bit easier to do. I'm not good with wiring at all, but it wasn't that hard to swap over this harness at all. The hardest thing was just getting everything ran into the spot where it's supposed to be after you push it through the firewall. That's where it comes through the firewall at. It comes up to this fuse block up here. And so yeah, it's not that bad to do. It is time consuming. I think it took me the better part of a whole day to get everything ran and get the old one out, get everything ran into its new spot. This is the D15B engine that I put in my wagon on the first time I did a manual swap. I put this engine in there because my other engine, I was just looking for more power, and it ended up that this one had less torque than the stock D16 A6. I think that's what it is. But I was looking for more power, and I actually didn't get more power out of this engine. And then I had this tranny put in it, and this is the one that was reverse was blown. And I bought this off a guy off Craigslist with it was pretty much just the whole drivetrain, and this was bolted up to an engine that I parted out. But this go around, I have this D16 A6 stock RT wagon engine that I pulled out of a car that it had been wrecked, but it would still run and drive. So I got it running, and the guy told me this had 8,000 miles on it because he had it completely rebuilt, and this engine ran perfect. And then it had this tranny in it that I got to run through all the gears, reverse, and everything worked in it. So I'm in the process of putting this tranny back on this engine and putting those two in my car. Another thing is, when I put this transmission in the first time, I redid seals and new clutch and all that stuff. And this transmission was out of an '88 Civic wagon, and I wanted to put new CV axle seals in it, so I went to the parts store and I said, hey, I got a '91 Civic wagon I want axle seals for. So they gave me the parts, and I come back home to go put them in, and they were the wrong size. Well, I found out later that 88 and 89 Civic wagon axle seals are different sizes than 90 and 91 axle seals. So if you ever buy a transmission off someone, you need to determine what year it came out of, because 88 and 89 are different than 90 and 91. I don't know why they made the change in between those 2 years, but that was something I ran into when I put that other transmission in that had blown reverse. And I think that's it. I mean, it was 6 years ago when I did this, so if there's anything I'm forgetting, I'll make another video. But pretty simple swap. There's not a whole lot to it. I'm not a very mechanical person, but I still did it anyways, so yeah.